Greetings everyone, and welcome back to another beginner guide video for Warhammer 2. In this video, I'll be taking a look at the campaign and giving you some tips. Like my previous beginner video, these tips might not be very helpful to experienced players, as they are more tailored to newer players. However, you are of course welcome to watch the video and give me some feedback on how to improve it, even if you don't need these tips. I won't specifically be looking at the Vortex or Mortal Empire campaign, but rather give tips that should be applicable to both of them. One of the hard things about giving general tips is that each faction is different, and so these tips doesn't always work quite as well for every race or every faction. Nonetheless, you should be able to use them to some efficiency no matter what you are playing. Starting off the video with a little question that a lot of players tend to have is that, should I play Vortex or Mortal Empire first? First of all, you won't even have access to Mortal Empire if you don't own Total War Warhammer 1. If you do own both games, I'd say choose Vortex if you want to have the story experience, and choose Mortal Empire if you just want to try a faction, see which units they have and how they play. Alright, now that we're done with that, let's get into the actual guide. A question that often passes through the lips of a new player is what to build in their cities. Obviously, they could build some military buildings to allow for recruitment of new units, but maybe getting those trade resources would be better, or maybe more income so they can actually recruit more units and can afford them. Even harder comes the question for later in the game. Are some of these buildings not worth it anymore? Should I focus on constructing advanced military? Or maybe I should keep my basic ones to recruit cheap units? Here are a few in-game examples from some of my personal campaigns. First, let's take a look at an early Dark Elf Mortal Empires campaign. So here we are in my Dark Elves Mortal Empire campaign. Very early on, it sees turn 22. Now, in Warhammer, each province has a number of cities. So this province is called the Iron Mountains and consists of these 4 cities as you see right here. Now, early on, it is never wrong to go the way that I'm doing it right here. You want to get the growth and income buildings in your minor settlements and focus on the military and more special buildings in your capital. So for example, here in Nagarond, I have all my recruitment buildings and also some trade resources. In my minor settlements, such as Har Kaldra and Rakdo Gorge and Altar of Ultimate Darkness, I have my growth buildings and my income buildings. This way I ensure that I'm gaining growth to upgrade my main settlements, but I'm also earning money. I can save my advanced military buildings for my main capital, and once I start building those, I can start transferring my basic military buildings over to the smaller cities. The reason why you want to build your advanced military buildings in your province, in your capital, is because they go above tier 3. Now, every city can go to tier 3, but only your capital can go beyond tier 3. So, in theory, I could build a non-basic military building in this city, but as you can see, I can't upgrade it. So I would be able to recruit Harpies and Scourge Runner Chariots, but I wouldn't get access to the Manticore or any of the Hydras. So a solid plan is to just build growth and income buildings and then follow up with a 4th building of your choice. If you feel the city is exposed to attacks, you can build some walls. If you have a trade resource, I'd highly recommend you build that, or anything else that you might think you need in this province. Now let me show you how it looks in a late game campaign, which is my personal High Elf Vortex. So here we are in a Vortex campaign I completed with the High Elves. This is after completing all the rituals, which is why you don't see the ritual progress bar up here. So if we take a look at Lothran now, you can see that I don't have a single basic military building here anymore. Now why is that? As you can see, we're on turn 185. So at this point in the game, I have so much money that I don't really need my basic units anymore. So I replaced all my basic military buildings with the advanced military buildings, as well as some special buildings that can only be built here in Lothran. By the way, if a city has special buildings that can only be constructed here, you can see them by this little yellow triangle, strategic location. You can also identify if a city has trading resources by the symbol next to it. It'll show the different resource that's available and what they can do. So you see over here, in Tower of Luzan, I have this salt mine, which provides me with salt, which can be used to trade. I would always recommend that you construct these trading resources in whatever city has them. They are almost always a positive effect to them. Sometimes it's just trade resources, but other times they can unlock technologies or give bonuses to the city itself. Now you might also notice that I don't have any growth buildings anymore in these cities. That's because they're fully upgraded. Lothrin's tier 5, Tower of Lausanne is tier 3, Glittering Tower is tier 3, so I don't have any use for my growth buildings anymore. So I've replaced the growth buildings with different things. For example, here I still have my income, I have my trade resource, and then I have walls in case the city is attacked, so they're a little bit more defended. In the Glittering Tower, I also have trading resources and a wall, but I have this 4th slot open to build whatever I feel like. So I could build this, the Glittering Tower Lighthouse, which would give me more income from trade and more income from ports. Again, I could have built this earlier, but I was prioritizing getting the growth going and getting the income. If we go to another one of my provinces, let's take over here, Safari. You can see it's the same thing, but I don't have nearly as many military buildings. It is overkill to build the same amount of military buildings in every city. As you can also see, there's less construction slots over here in White Tower of Hoeth than there is over in Lothen. So this has 10 construction slots, while the Wife Tower only has 8. So yeah, I don't think it's necessary to have all my military buildings in White Tower of Hoeth and right over here in Lothen. So the buildings I prioritize over here in White Tower of Hoeth are buildings that give me additional bonuses when there's more of them. For example, I have these for recruitment of nobles as well as giving me a higher hero capacity. So I could have just had one of these buildings, but then I wouldn't be able to recruit that many nobles. And maybe I wanted to have multiple nobles for multiple armies or for multiple scouting. Another example here at Avalorn. I don't have any growth buildings outside of the port. The reason why I still have the port is because it gives income and growth. It's a 2-in-1. It's a win-win. The buildings I do have, which are advanced military, are things that will let me increase my capacity of heroes, such as the Tower of Mages, giving me plus recruitment capacity for lore masters and for mages, as well as plus rank for these units. I do also have a few military buildings that don't give anything else than recruitment. This is for the high-level endgame kind of things, right? Sometimes I want to be able to go to a city close to me and refill my capacity of the high-tier units, such as my dragons. Another example of trade resources right here. Look at these bonuses I get for building these trade resources. I give the exotic animal cages for trade, but I also get less upkeep for Great Eagles, Phoenix, and Dragon units in all armies. I have less recruitment cost for these units, and their recruit rank starts at +2 compared to normal. So, to summarize, I think it's a good idea to start off with growth and income buildings. As you level up your settlements and they reach the max tier, you can start removing the growth buildings. I would still keep the income buildings unless you really need something else, and then start building whatever is necessary and what you need. Trade resources, towers, public order, whatever it is you need, you should get it. Speaking of buildings, I should mention commandments real quick. Once you control all cities in a region, you'll be able to issue a commandment, and these have different bonuses depending on which faction you play. As I said before, I think growth and income is super important in the early game, so I almost always start off getting the growth plus commandment, and then I switch to something else as I need it. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about leveling your lords and heroes. In each campaign, you will start with a legendary lord, depending on which faction and race you choose. As their name suggests, legendary lords are vastly superior to a regular lord in almost every way. You will also have access to these generic lords and heroes, however. What all of these have in common is that they earn experience, which level them up, giving them skill points that can be spent on different skills. Legendary lords usually have access to unique skills and or spells, which I won't be covering in this video. Please note that there is essentially no wrong way to spend your skill points on any lord or any hero. The best way to do it, in my opinion, is kind of have a plan for what you want to do with that lord and or hero. For example, if I know this lord will mostly be defending a walled settlement and not really be venturing out into the world to fight armies, I'll spend points on skills that makes spear and missile units stronger. That way I don't have to spend a ton of money on units that might not see a lot of combat, but they will still be more powerful than your regular cheap units, and so their ability to defend the walls and or settlement has increased. For heroes, I usually focus on skills that makes them into a one-man army. For magic uses, most points will go into different spells, making them stronger, but I almost always try and rush the Arcane Conduit skill as fast as possible, as it just makes them cast more spells and cast them more often. Both lords and heroes usually have access to different mounts. Sometimes they can even have access to multiple mounts. As fun as it could have looked, you cannot have your lord on multiple mounts at the same time. However, you can switch between mounts if you have multiple unlocked. But in general, I would recommend just looking at which mounts are available for that lord or hero, and not unlock any other mount until the one that you've chosen is available. As I mentioned earlier, the skill tree can be very different from faction to faction, so I can't cover every single one of them. However, there are a few standout skills that are available to almost every lord or hero that I would like to point out. For lords, at some point in your campaign, you almost always want to get Route Marcher, Lightning Strike, and Immortality. For spellcasting lords, you still want to get the before mentioned skills, but you also want to get the Greater Arcane Conduit. Heroes does not have access to Route Marcher and Lightning Strike, as they are not able to start combat or carry an army. However, you can still get Immortality for them, and I would recommend that. If you use your heroes outside of combat, maxing out the Specialist skill is also very valuable. A good thing to think about for the lords and their skills is that the blue skill line are things that will improve how you perform on the campaign. It could be how far your character can move, how much your units replenish each turn, things like that. For the red skill line are things that improve your units in combat, how much melee defense they have, how much attack they have, stuff like that. And for the yellow line are things that will improve your lord in combat. Sometimes these yellow traits also have unique benefits for units, but usually they just focused on improving your lord. Now let's talk a little bit about difficulty level and what changes between each level. As many other games, you can change the difficulty level of each campaign before you start it. Now, I would love to break down what changes between each of them, but honestly, there doesn't seem to be enough solid data about it anywhere. It's really weird for a game in this day and age to still have these changes hidden and not shown in-game, but they are. So I can't tell you the exact numbers, but I can tell you some of the things that changes. First of all, there are two different modifiers for difficulty, one for the campaign and one for battle. For the campaign difficulty, it changes how many advantages the AI gets and how large penalties you get on the campaign map. For example, on hard and above, all your settlements will have a penalty to the public order. This means that it might be necessary to build at least one building that improves the public order in that region. The AI gets some cheats, as I mentioned before, but I don't have any specific numbers. All I can tell you is from my own experience. And from that, I can say that the AI either 1, gets more money early on, or 2, has less upkeep and recruitment costs for units. The battle difficulty modifier is the hardest one to get any data on. I know for certain that the player gets a leadership penalty, meaning that your units will rout and surrender faster, and that the AI gets a bonus to leadership, giving the opposite effect. There also seems to be proof of the AI getting percentage bonuses to melee attack, melee defense, charge bonus, missile damage, and weapon damage. However, no one seems to be completely sure about these numbers, and I've found different tables with different numbers, so I'm not quite sure. If anyone in the comments think they have solid proof of what's happening, please post it down below. I would be very grateful. And if you yourself want to know more about that, I suggest googling it and looking at those different tables, because they are out there, they're just having different numbers, which makes it hard to determine if it's true or not. I just want to round off this section by saying that it really doesn't matter what difficulty you play on. Play on whatever you have the most fun with, or what you find the most challenging, whatever you like. There's nothing wrong with starting a campaign, finding out that it's too hard, and then restarting a campaign on a lower difficulty. I personally exclusively play on hard campaign difficulty and hard battle difficulty. It gives me a good blend of challenge and my units not being useless. Now let's take a look at scouting and hero actions. Earlier I talked about how you could level your hero to increase their power in combat. But heroes can also be used outside of combat, being able to move around the campaign map much like the Lord. However, unlike Lords, heroes have certain actions available to them that only they can perform. The actions available to each hero are different from faction to faction, but they usually have one action that interacts with your own Lord's army, one that interacts with the enemy Lord's armies, one that interacts with enemy settlements, and one that interacts with enemy heroes. For example, some heroes can have the Damage Walls action, which has a chance of creating holes in the enemy settlement if it has walls, giving your army an easier time of entering the city during siege battles. Another useful action is Assassinate, which gives your hero a chance to kill an enemy hero. I often have one hero purely dedicated to scouting and assassinating enemy heroes. Since heroes can be quite strong in combat, you're basically removing a full unit from an enemy lord if you're able to assassinate a hero in their party. I do need to clarify one thing though. I didn't know this at first when I started playing, so probably you won't either. You will only permanently kill the enemy hero if you get a critical success. If you just get a success on the assassinate action, you will only wound the enemy hero, which means they will come back after around 5 turns. Sometimes it's also a good idea to take a hero out of your lord's army to scout the terrain ahead. That way you can see if you're running into a large enemy army or if the way is clear for you to move in and attack your target. For the last part of this video, I just quickly want to mention that Vortex rituals are not as important as you might think. I know I said I wouldn't cover either of the campaigns specifically, but I do think this one can be quite a good tip for new players that try out the Vortex campaign. As you gather ritual currency, the different rituals will become available to you. However, you might notice that one or more AIs are ahead of you and start their rituals before you. Now, the game makes it sound like it's super important to immediately stop them from completing this ritual. However, that's not really the case, so don't worry. If an enemy faction completes the last ritual before you still have a chance to teleport to a battle and try and stop them. If you do manage to stop them at the final battle, they can no longer win the Vortex campaign. You also don't need to start your own rituals as soon as they become available. Maybe you need a few turns to get your armies in position or recruit more units. To skip starting a ritual, simply press the arrow right next to the Vortex ritual available notification you get at the bottom right corner. Okay, and that's it for this beginner's guide to campaign for Warhammer 2. I hope you learned something from this, and if you have further questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. Now, I am well aware there are a lot more things that I could cover, but I didn't want this video to get too long. So if you want a continuation of this, please let me know as well. If you want to see me play campaigns live, you can check out my Twitch stream. There is a link in the description below. Until then, thank you for watching, good luck on the battlefield, and I'll hopefully see you all very soon.